Hello, and welcome to the Journeys of Folco Hornblower, the One Ring 2nd Edition Strider Mode adventure, written and narrated by me, Ryan Hewlett. Bucklanders of all shapes and sizes, from children, tweens, to old, all whisper to each other and stare at the three hobbits now walking through Buckland from Brandy Hall. Folco, spear and bow in each hand, Berilac, his axe slung in one hand resting on his shoulder, bow in the other, and Rollo, sweating at the brow already, setting the pace to get to his farm in Crickhollow. The three reach Rollo's place, a nondescript, small but homely house similar in architecture to those seen in the main passages in Mickle Delving. The home is, unlike the rest of Folco had seen in Crickhollow, lies near the high hay, and incidentally, the edges of the old forest. So I steps out to the house that evening, and there it was, plain as the moon on a clear night, over there. Rollo, wasting no time in pointing in the general direction of the wall of the high hay. Folco looked at Berilac, both now casually walking over to further investigate. Folco spots a small trail leading towards the eastern end of Rollo's property, dipping and running into the high hay itself. Investigating further, both Folco and Berilac, as they inch their way closer to the edges of the high hay, the hair on their back of their necks begin to rise, as they get the uncanny feeling they're being watched, but more than Rollo and the handful of other hobbits viewing from the distance. Suddenly, and without warning, the form of a large wolf-like creature, black as coal, with eyes as red as the setting sun low on the horizon, leaps out from the long shadow cast from the rising sun against the high hay, and with its huge, gaping jaw strikes at Folco, who, despite his best attempts, failed to leap out of the way. But as fast as the attack came from the beast occurred, it ran down the path spotted by Folco and vanished into the darkened wood of the old forest. "Are you all right?" Berilac asked Folco. "Took a nasty bite in my shoulder, it did. The thing is fast. I'm going to need to rest up a bit before we chase it into the forest. You know much about it, the forest that is?" Folco, slowly moving over to a rock and sitting down and resting his bow and spear alongside it. Berilac, shaking his head no. "Nah. Not much I know about the old forest, save for it being here. Woody End is my ground. You'd think it's similar, but all I know is this place is darker than a cave in the hills of Scary." Folco rubbed his now bruised shoulder, thankful that the tough leather of his shirt kept the fangs from puncturing into his flesh. Looking around, he noticed something gently moving in the early morning breeze. Walking over, he removes what appears to be a few tufts of blackened fur caught on a small hinge. "Either way, Berilac, the beast, dare I say beasts, looks to be coming from inside the old forest." Folco, turning to Berilac and Rollo, a look of a visible wave of fear on his face. Taking a deep breath, Folco turned to look at the trail, what was visible of the old forest over the hedge. "If we don't hunt this wolf now, no telling what matter of trouble it'll bring to this place. We shall leave soon while the trail is still fresh." A number of moments pass, and Folco, his shoulder now feeling a little looser, grabbed his bow and spear. "Let's go!" And with that, and with the good luck from Rollo Boffin, Folco and Berilac, following the trail and walking through the gate opening up to beyond the wall of the high hay, disappeared into the old forest. A number of hobbits, now gathered on the boundaries of Rollo's property, muttered to themselves, each chattering about the early morning events, some even placing wagers on if the two foreigners returned from the depths of the old forest. The pair of hobbits trekked slowly into the old forest. Sounds of creaking trees and the wind whistling through the branches echo through the darkened expanse. The bright sun of the early morning fades as they walk deeper. Turning around, Folco barely seeing the green hedge of the high hay as it disappears from view, as if the tree themselves moved to hide it. Folco takes a deep swallow, looks to Berilac, and nods to continue into the forest. Berilac, swinging his axe around from off his shoulders, and as he does, the moan and groan of the forest echoes throughout. The branches of the collection of trees, all gnarled and bent, seem to reach out for the pair of hobbits, barely brushing against them as they walk through. A path lay before them, and as they follow it, it opens up into a wide, bare space where, unlike the rest of the forest, no tree grows. Forming a wide circle, the warmth of the sun hits the duo, each relaxing for a brief moment to catch their breath. They continue to the other side of the clearing and back into the reaching branches of the gnarled, twisted, and dark trees of the old wood. "This is an ancient wood, and it has a feeling of dread unlike the Woody End," Berilac commented to Folco. "It almost feels like these trees are watching us as we go through." The trees again moaned, creaked, and branches and exposed roots seemingly grasping for Berilac and Folco's arms and legs. What had been a good path that was easy to follow upon entering the thick wood, now was but a hope that they follow the path. But, both being seasoned veterans of the hunt, Folco familiar with the Chetwood, and Berilac the woody end, they continued to find signs of the trail left behind by the creature. A number of hours pass, and breaking for a quick breather, a morsel of mushrooms Folco had given to him by Farmer Maggot, they both gathered some extra strength and resolve for the continued hunt. Berilac, agitated by the closeness of the trees, the hanging branches and the thick covering of the roots, brandished again his axe, ready to chop some of the reaching branches and growth away. The forest angrily moaned and groaned, and a buzzing sound started to emanate from behind one of the old trees. Before Berilac knew it, and then Folco, a swarm of huge gnats surrounded them, stung at their faces, necks, wrists, and any area exposed, especially their feet, typical of any hobbit. "Quick, let's get out of here," Berilac yelled, as both he and Folco darted away from the stinging flies. It took about 20 minutes of running, weaving to and fro, before the cloud of flies dissipated, each of them now red, bleeding, and as demoralized as one could from such an experience. "Best not be thinking ill will of the forest, lest we go through something like worse than that," Folco whispered to Berilac. "Let's keep up to the trail and to ourselves. Don't need to anger this wood any more than we already have." Whether it was the thick wood or not, the pair of hobbits silently walked through the forest, keeping to the trail left by the creature, further going deeper and deeper into the old forest, twisting and turning, but keeping to what both thought was a southeasterly direction. The low sound of a passing water against root and rock could be heard just off in the distance, and as they approached, Folco signaled to stop Berilac, both now crouched behind a fallen, rotting tree. Just ahead, a stone's throw away, they saw it. The creature, a large wolf by the looks of it, prowled along the banks of what Folco and Berilac wagered was the Withywindle, the river that ran from the old forest just at the edges of the Barrow Downs westward into the Brandywine. Folco wagered the beast was waiting for them, but for whatever reason they did not sense that they were there yet. Looking around, Folco noticed off to the side of the woodland open to reveal a great thorn thicket that was, to hobbits at least, impossibly large and twisted. A pair of deep red eyes emerged out of the shadows, and to the dismay of both Folco and Berilac, they realized that not only was the one wolf before them, but now another. Folco, showing a sign of disbelief, realized that the second was none other than the one he had felled the night before. How could this be? He muttered under his breath. A slight breeze blew through the forest, down from the location across the thicket. The scent of the two hobbits going across the nares of the two wolves, each on now turning their large heads, their deep, fiery red eyes now focused on the pair. Berilac quickly nocked an arrow. Folco readied his spear. Kill or be killed was the thought both hobbits had come across both their minds. Folco, standing, his shoulder pulled backwards, his wrist fixed and his hands grasping the shaft of the spear, launches it forwards towards the wolf, prowling the banks of the Withywindle. Folco thought he launched it good, but whether the beast moved or hitting an overhanging branch, the spear fell short. Folco quickly pulled out and knocked an arrow into his bow, readying it for when the wolf eventually would counter. Berilac pulled back the string of his bow, taking aim at the wolf crawling out under the deep thicket, and after taking a slow breath out, let go, the arrow striking true into the chest walls of the black wolf. Folco, skirmishing behind a tree, turns and takes careful aim at the closest to him. The bow creaked under the draw, and with taking little time to think, Folco released the arrow, and although striking true, the arrow harmlessly bounced off the toughened hair and hide of the now leaping creature facing Folco. The wolf landed next to Folco, and with its open maw, dug its pink-stained fangs into the forward-facing shoulder of Folco. Fortunately for Folco, the toughened leather held true, and the fangs did not pierce into his flesh. Folco grimaced with the shouting pain now flowing down through his arm. Berilac, dropping his bow and readying his axe, let out a battle cry and charged the other beasts. Swinging down with his axe, but losing his footing, it landed just shy of the creature's left front leg and large paw. The wolf, now in reach, turned its now grappling maw and clamped its blood-stained teeth into the right exposed forearm of Berilac. Berilac let out a loud cry of pain as blood now gushed from the puncture wounds left by the creature's sharpened fangs. Folco pulled back and scurried behind again another nearby tree, taking aim and knocking back another arrow. Releasing the bolt this time, had the head of the arrow striking deep into the flesh of the wolf beast. The wolf snarled in pain and brandished its fangs at Folco, and lurched forward for another attack, but this time only scraping the back of the tree Folco took cover behind. Berilac swung his axe back and all over the top of the wolf engaged with him, but the wolf, despite its size, jolted back so that the axe head once again missed and just grazing the side of its fur, the sharpened blade shaving some of the coarse hair off its coat. The wolf again, in kind, lurched forward, and with a fierce crunch clenched its fangs, this time around Berilac's other arm. Berilac again let out an even louder scream of pain, blood spurting out now across the creature's head and torso and over the chest and face of Berilac. Berilac loosened the grasp he had around his axe. His vision began to fade slightly as a wave of weariness came across his body. Folco sprung across and behind the wolf, and as he knocked another arrow and set to aim, he slipped on some moss-covered root, the arrow flying off into a nearby tree. The forest groaned and moaned, and the branches weaved to and fro. The wolf growled and turned to launch back at Folco, mouth again brandishing its fangs, but it missed Folco once again, digging its fang into the nearby root. Berilac pulled back from the wolf facing him and garnered what strength he had left, pulled the axe back and across his chest. As the wolf leaps for him, he set the axe head facing it, and although it didn't pierce the tough fur and skin of the beast, the fangs of the creature scraped and scratched the hardened metal of the axe head. Folco, turning around, pulling out another arrow from his back quiver and taking a few steps, pulled back and shot an arrow at the lunging wolf. The arrow harmlessly bounced off the fur of the wolf once again, but seemingly distracted enough from its attack that it missed entirely Folco's left flank. The wolf now wrestles Berilac against a nearby tree, its huge frame and weight of its body pinning Berilac against the bark. Despite his best efforts to bring the axe head into its chest, the wolf managed to bite down hard into Berilac's shoulder, its fangs digging deep into Berilac's flesh, touching bone of his shoulder blade. Berilac lets out a loud cry again of pain, blood now spurting and pulsing out, the bite obviously hitting a major artery. Berilac's vision started to fade as the edges of his vision started to blacken, the salivating fanged mouth of the wolf the last he saw before starting to black out. Folco looked over at the cry from Berilac to see the wolf going in for another bite. But before the wolf dug deep again into the upper torso of the pinned, hardy hobbit, the sound of a merry singing ran through the forest. The wolf ready to set its jaws into Berilac, and the wolf staring down Folco, ready to take advantage of the now distracted hobbit, both cocked their heads towards the sound of the singing, and both in unison stepped back from the hobbit duo. Folco looked over and to his surprise saw a figure, larger than a hobbit but smaller than a man, gingerly dancing through the forest as if at a spring festival, wearing a blue overcoat, brown pants, and bright yellow boots. As he enters the clearing, by the thicket where the battle has raged, he looks over to Folco, and with the tip of his great floppy hat and a bow, and after straightening his jacket, he breaks out into a kind of sing-song rhyme. Hey ho, silly ho, tramp across the forest, little creatures underfoot, black dogs are the sorest. Go now, silly dogs, cast away your ire. Hobbits only hope to help. Come now, little dogs, no need to be so dire. Coming to the spot between the hobbits, the wolves back off from the new arrival and break and flee away from his presence. The figure turns to Folco and then to Berilac, who now lay slumped forward, shallowly breathing, his axe now laying on the ground near his feet. The figure moves over and carefully brushes Berilac, and within moments Berilac takes in a deep breath and wide-eyed spots the gentleman in front of him. Come now, my fellow friends, let you rest your weary heads over yonder up the withy window before the stars shine and twinkle. Almost as if under a spell, both Folco and Berilac took the gentleman up on his offer. As the figure guided them through the thickened wood, Folco noticed that the trees, like the wolves before, seemed to break and move away from this merry fellow. Folco and Berilac later learned that the mysterious gentleman was none other than Tom Bombadil, the master. Coming to a clearing in the eastern edges of the old forest before the Barrow Downs and along the banks of the Withywindle, Folco spots what would surely be the home of Tom. A feeling of warmth and peace, unlike that of the forest wood surrounding it, pass over Folco and Berilac, and any awareness that they had fades to a distant memory. Like a carefully maintained garden of any Shire Hobbit, the surrounding grasses, flowers, and hedges of the home are exquisite and beautiful. Folco unable to recognize most of the species of plants and flowers, however. Evening approaches and Tom bids them to rest and spend the night in the quiet comfort and peace of his home. No foul creature of the wood or anywhere will haunt them here. Folco and Berilac graciously accept. Where else would they go? Not quite in the sing-song rhyme as they had heard before, Tom does speak in a poetic manner about the beasts that have haunted the old forest and now into the Shire. The hounds, yes, just simple hounds, were once owned by a lord of men, residing long ago in a tower of stone which rose among the hills, which are now known to those as the Barrow Downs. During a terrible war, the lord had perished among flames and his faithful hounds with him. Evil spirits descended upon the Barrow Downs many years later. The hounds returned as dark reflections of what they once were. They aren't entirely evil, Tom continues to tell, and still a light of goodness and hope dwell within them. Unfortunately, between the ill will of the old forest and the passing of time, the creature's malice continues to grow. Kind hounds they once were, and yet not evil makes them growl. If one could sing a song true, then faithful friends be thy two. Folco and Berilac, enthralled by the presence of Tom, wholeheartedly agree, and Tom spends the rest of the evening teaching the two hobbits the songs to soothe the savage beasts, and advises the pair of hobbits to think and name the beasts once the songs have been sung. It'll take them a while, and they must finish the singing through in order to bring back the hounds from the darkness. Folco and Berilac looked at each other, and spent the evening thinking of names. Odd that they are naming such foul creatures, but do this they must. Morning comes, and Folco and Berilac are greeted by one of the most fairest creatures they have ever laid eyes on, Goldberry, Tom's wife. As Folco and Berilac eat a fine breakfast of fresh berries and other fruits that Goldberry presented after having picked them earlier before, Goldberry tells them that the pair of beasts are still at their lair, prowling around the Thorny Thicket. After the quick breakfast, Goldberry bids them farewell, and as they leave the serenity of Tom's home and the calming presence of Miss Goldberry, Tom greets them outside the home and bids them a good day, and reminds them again about the songs and completing them to their fullest, lest the creatures remain foul and evil. Then off Tom jaunts merrily past into the river, off to collect river lilies for his fair maiden. Folco and Berilac looked at each other, mouths slightly open in awe, wondering how they'll explain the past day's events to the Master of Buckland, Farmer Maggot, and to Bilbo Baggins. None will believe what had transpired. Then a thought came across Falco's mind. No worries, Berilac. If we don't sing well enough, no worries on what we'll have to say to the others, because we won't have to, Folco said half-heartedly. Berilac grinned and nodded in agreement, and then pointed down the path they traveled earlier along the bank of the Withywindle. Following the bank for some time and nearing the thicket, both Folco and Berilac spot the beasts. With no time to think, the duo rush in to meet the beasts, and once within earshot, they start to sing the songs from Tom Bombadil. Folco recites the first, the spell of the words seemingly causing the creatures to writhe and buck as if in pain, as one was being burned by an open flame. Berilac followed suit, and in a similar fashion the beasts moved to and fro, continuing to writhe in pain from the sound of the song sung by the two hobbits. The beasts shook their large heads and growled at the singing, both leaping, one each at the fully exposed hobbits. Folco reacted and stepped to the side mid-song, the wolf landing near but missing with its open maw. Berilac wasn't so fortunate. The second, slightly larger wolf, the one Folco later would realize he met at the ferry, landed on Berilac, knocking him back and biting him hard into his shoulder and neck. The sharpened teeth and fangs pierced deep into Berilac's neck, hitting the carotid artery, and as it pulled back, taking and ripping flesh from Berilac's neck, blood spurted and gushed out from Berilac's now motionless body. Falco looked down at Berilac and, despite being completely awestruck, found enough resolve to find his breath and sing the last of the songs. But the sight of Berilac and the blood now pooling around him too much, and he lost his place. Both wolves now facing Falco, mouths open and salivating in anticipation of fresh meat. The first wolf struck and knocked Falco back against a tree, slightly winding him, but in doing so opened up for the other to leap in and bite deep down into the leg of Falco. Falco let out a loud scream as the pain of the bite into his thigh muscle shocked through his body. Falco looked into the air deep into his lungs, and with the foul-smelling breath of both beasts across his face, sung the last rhyme Tom taught them the last evening. The words echoed through the forest, and whether through magic or just the way it sounds, the beasts immediately stepped back and started to slowly retreat. Falco looked, and before him the black as coal wolves started to change, first their bodies shrinking into the size of a medium-sized hound, and then the eyes changing from fiery red to a pale, cool blue. Then Falco remembered Tom's words, the hounds must be named. Falco, shaking his head, spoke two names, not the original ones they had decided, but ones that just quickly came across his mind, Chuck and Barry. And with that, the ghastly creatures now appeared to be playful, otherwise lovable hounds, barking cheerfully at Falco. They then darted off into the direction of Tom's house along the banks of the Withywindle and out of sight. Falco, with a smile across his face, suddenly then realized and hearing the gasping, labored breathing of Berilac nearby. Running over, he quickly surveys the scene and his condition. It's not promising, but Falco tries to cover the gaping wound with a tear from his shirt, but to no avail. Within a few short, shallow breaths, Berilac's body lay motionless. Falco kneeling back in complete sadness and sorrow. He hadn't seen anyone die before his eyes, and the event would be now a lasting memory. No sooner had Berilac passed, the forest started to moan and groan. Before Falco's eyes, the roots of the trees started to wrap around the body of Berilac and drag it deeper into the ground. Falco jumped back at the sight, as Berilac's body was now pulled further and further and out of sight. Then Falco noticed something peculiar. The hunting knife that had once been on his belt and his trusted axe remained. Falco wagered that the forest left it there as a parting gift for Falco's friend, or it simply despised the foreign objects and wished them gone. Falco figured that the latter was to be true. This old wood is too foul a thing to be that kind and thoughtful. Picking up Berilac's axe and knife, and not wanting to tarry any longer than he should, he proceeded back out the forest whence they originally came. The forest seemed to open the path, unlike before where it seemingly tried to stop them in their trek in, but back out to the Shire as if it wanted Falco gone as quickly as a hobbit could walk. So before long, Falco reached the gate of the High Hay to Crickhollow, and was greeted by a few happy and not so happy hobbits, those who wagered neither would return on the other side. "Well, it is a good sight to see you, Falco, but where is your companion, Berilac? I don't see him behind you," Gorboduc Brandybuck asked Falco, all concerned. Falco gave a sullen nod of his head, no, and spoke no words. Gorboduc continued, "And of the beast?" With little fanfare, Folco responded, "The Black Wolf of Woody End and its mate won't be bothering the Shire no more." Falco, nodding to Gorboduc, dropped his head and walked past. Gorboduc responded, "I and the people of Buckland thank you." Falco didn't show any sign to Gorboduc that he heard him, as he continued to walk past Rollo's place and the gathered crew of hobbits. Gorboduc spoke loudly to the gathered crowd of Crickhollow. "Pass word to all in Buckland that the beast will haunt our lands no more." Cheers rang out from the crowd, but Falco cared not, and as he walked and the sound of the crowd faded, Falco could only think of the fate befallen Berilac.